Your body will be transformed by exercising simple soul compassion for all living beings. Jeev Karunya Vilakam. By Sri Chithambaram Ramalingam Arat Paranjothi Valalar Swamigal. What is God's natural manifestation? Those who were given the gift of human birth on this planet should recognize and seize the opportunity to benefit their souls from their birth while it is still possible. Obtaining the absolute natural bliss of God, who by his power of grace has made all the universes, all worlds, all things, all living beings, all ways of living, and all use manifest and exist and enlighten them, is what is meant by the benefit for the soul. This benefit for the soul is to always live the unique great life, at all places, and in all ways without any sort of hindrance. It is important to understand that the only way to achieve that beautiful existence, in which one lives without struggle and achieves natural bliss, is through the gift of grace, which is God's natural manifestation. How to achieve God's natural manifestation? To learn how to achieve God's natural manifestation, grace. It is important to understand that the only way to receive God's grace is to live a compassionate life toward all living things, and that there is no other way to receive even a small amount of it. How is it that the only way to acquire God's grace is to live a compassionate life toward all living things and not by any other means? Compassion is the natural manifestation of living things' empathy or their souls, whereas grace is God's mercy. It follows that we can obtain mercy through sympathy and result in manifestation. Grace can only be attained by showing compassion for other living things and nothing else, according to experience. Hence it cannot be attained in any other way. It should be clear that this is supported by no other evidence. Since having compassion for all things is the only way to attain grace, it follows that the road of knowledge and virtue entails living a compassionate life toward all beings. On the other hand, the path of ignorance or vices entails living a life devoid of sympathy for living things. All good things will exist because of the helping power that arises when compassion for living things does. Conversely, when compassion for living things vanishes, knowledge and love also to vanish instantly. As a result, helping power also vanishes, and when it vanishes, all evils will surface. It follows that virtue is nothing more than having compassion for living things, while vices is having no compassion for living things. What is the divine bliss? The enlightenment that results from living a life of compassion for living things is the enlightenment of God, and the bliss that results from living a life of compassion for living things is the divine bliss. The liberated while they are still living are only those who have attained their goal, having seen and enjoyed this manifestation and bliss for a long time and are thus fulfilled. And then only they will know God by knowledge and will become God himself. But what exactly does it mean to live a compassionate life for all creatures? By the souls of living things melting toward other living things, one is to live, worshiping God. When will the soul's compassion for other beings begin to melt? Witnessing or learning about the pain of living things due to hunger, thirst, disease, desire, poverty, fear, or the suffering associated with being slain will cause the soul to melt. What is a person's right to feel compassion for other living things? All living things are brothers with the same rights, because they were all created by the all-powerful God as an integral part of the natural truth. The age-old spiritual right is the melting of the soul that happens when one brother sees another suffering or anticipates that he will suffer because of some danger, and the former recognizes the latter as his brother.
There is no fraternal right to some people because their I-called spiritual knowledge has become very dim due to tuberculosis called nescience. Additionally, the mind, etc., which are the spectacles serving as auxiliary eyes to be of help, had become thick and had lost their luster, blocking the light to pass through them. As a result, they are unable to see and recognize others' suffering. It should be clear that despite the existence of the fraternal right, compassion for living things did not develop. This teaches us that persons with compassion for other living things possess enlightened spiritual vision or insight. Insight. The pains of living things with the soul experience. The pains of living things brought on by hunger, thirst, fear, etc. are experiences of the functioning organs, indriyam, sense organs, and subtle inner instruments, karana. They are not experiences of the soul. Therefore, having compassion for living things has no advantages. The sense organs and the working organs in this physical body are merely tools that are unconscious and lifeless, separate from the life force, which is the soul, and God's natural manifestation, which is the knowledge of the knowledge. As a result, inanimate things are unaware of pleasure and suffering. The thought could not be claimed to have been joyful or depressed. The body is a tiny house created by God with subtle inner instruments, the sense organs, and working organs like the mind, etc., for the life force or soul to live in, much as how we build a house with red soil for a bodily living. The inhabitant does not sense the house, they only feel pleasure and misery. Furthermore, the only eyes that may cry are those whose vision has been affected by tuberculosis and looks via auxiliary eyes known as spectacles when they witness misery. Only the soul can experience pleasure and misery. Devices like the mind, sense organs, etc., which act as spectacles to the spiritual vision, are unable to do so. How do you explain the mind actions towards senses? The mind is delighted when something good happens to a living being. The mind relaxes when something bad occurs. Is it clear that the mind can feel both pleasure and pain? It's not true, no. The happiness or unhappiness of the soul as a result of the pleasure and pain it experiences is reflected through the subtle inner instruments, senses, and working organs like the mind, etc. The status of happiness is visible outside, just as the healthy or tired condition of the body of a person living in a crystal house is seen through the crystal, and the fresh or tired condition of the eyes is seen through the spectacles worn on them. Hence, pleasure and pain are sensations that the soul alone may have. The sense organs, working organs, and subtle inner instruments are merely tools that the soul uses to experience and appreciate pleasure and misery. Why do so many of God's living creatures suffer so greatly from thirst, hunger, terror, etc.? According to God's kind decree, these living beings in the previous body suffered greatly from hunger, thirst, terror, and other conditions since they did not like to live with compassion toward all living things and had chosen the road of vices because they were hard-hearted. Did living things once possess physical bodies? How? 1. This is how we know there was a previous occupant. It is common knowledge that a family man who moves into a home to raise a family and pays the rent must have previously raised a family and paid the rent in another home. Otherwise, he would not have been able to do so. If there is trouble in the current home, he will rent a different home. 2. Similarly, it should be clear to everyone that a living creature who has entered this body by paying food as rent must have previously lived in another body and paid the same type of rent for him to have existed, and that if any issue arises in this body as well, he will occupy another body. Consequently, living things have bodies now and will have bodies in the future as well. 3. The sinful acts that living things did in their prior bodies will continue in this body as well. It is explained as follows. If a family man ignored the house owner's instructions and entertained individuals with a bad reputation in the home where he resided, those negative reputational people will still follow him to his new home and keep him company even after he vacates the old one. Like this, if a living being had willingly disobeyed God's commands in the body he had previously occupied, those sins would continue to accompany him into this body as well. How does God's compassion work against the transgressors? 1. Will it not be against God's omnigracious law to have compassion on those living beings and provide them with food, shelter, and other necessities in order to relieve their suffering, if it is God's omnigracious ordinance to make those living beings who in their previous births had abandoned the path of showing compassion to living beings and had followed the sinful path, suffer from hunger, thirst, fear, etc.? 2. No, the king feeds even the worst criminals in jail, who have disobeyed his law and order, through his servants. Similarly, God feeds the sinners in hell, bandaged in various ways, who have completely broken his commandments, by his subordinate deities. Ordinary rebels who have disobeyed the king are fired from their jobs and exiled from their homeland in an effort to instill good morals in them. Since they have lost their jobs and other luxuries like good food, they wander the countryside in search of food and suffer. However, kind-hearted people will often come to their aid when they are seen. How do you explain the appreciation of God for compassionate people and uncompassionate people? 1. The monarch is pleased and commends the givers as admirable and kind family men when he learns of or witnesses this. Like this, God uses his omnipotent power to take away all the earthly luxurious pleasures that should have been enjoyed by beings who had disobeyed his command and committed ordinary crimes. 2. To make them more sensible, God also takes them out of their current bodies and embodies them in new ones. The beings are devoid of decent food and suffer as they move from place to place in pursuit of it because they have lost all their material comforts and worldly pleasures. 3. God will only be pleased, declaring them to be kind, and will bless them to thrive more and more. He won't be furious if merciful people, upon seeing their suffering, provide for them. Therefore, It should be clear to everyone that God's omnibenevolent law applauds beings who have compassion for other beings. Worldly discipline is made possible by this compassion for all living things. Here's how it's explained. For without compassion for other living things, knowledge and love will not manifest. Proper vision, unity, and a drive to help others won't develop in the absence of these elements, and the discipline of the weaker living things will be thwarted by the enmity of the stronger living things. 5. Even the discipline of the more powerful living things eventually becomes lazy and spoiled. When one is filled with hubris, one's behavior will be altered and destroyed by that of others. The worldly discipline is completely absent in the wild, where creatures without empathy like tigers and lions live. 6. Like this, there won't be any worldly discipline if there are no compassionate people to begin with. Because of compassion for all living things, even divine discipline exists, but without it, it would not. Grace cannot flourish without compassion for all living things. Without grace, the divine state cannot be realized. Without it, no one can experience the joy of redemption. Without it, heavenly discipline will not exist at all. How do you explain the deeds of uncompassionate people? 1. Since the road of compassion is not widely followed, vices following beings simply proliferate, and abhorrent lifestyles continue to rule everywhere. This is what takes place. 2. The hard-hearted people who did not show compassion to beings in accordance with their hard-hearted deeds have been born as wild animals such as tigers, bears, lions, elephants, yali, goats, pigs, dogs, and cats, as well as poisonous creatures such as snakes and scorpions, rather vicious creatures such as crocodiles and sharks, and as impure plants such as strychnine. 3. Understanding that compassion for others is the natural manifestation of the soul, it should be noted that those beings lacking in this natural manifestation will not experience God's manifestation both inside and outside of them. Compassion for others is not only a crucial tool for receiving God's grace, but it is also a partial manifestation of that grace. How do you explain the goals of compassionate people? The following is the main goal of having compassion toward other living things. Only bodies made of elements are the proper places for souls to become beings and evolve. Otherwise, spiritual manifestation will be hidden, nescience will rule, and that itself will be the cause of the problem. 2. All souls are an essential component of natural truth. They are the integral rightful place for grace, which is nature's manifestation to express itself as the knowledge of knowledge. Beings are given enough ability and freedom by the grace of God to try with the utmost caution to avert those dangers with their intellect, helped by their subtle inner instruments and sense organs and working organs. For as the primordial element, also known as Maya, delusion, is the primary cause for the bodies made up of the elements, dangers may occur frequently to the bodies. With the help of that freedom, all beings should try to gain spiritual benefit by removing the dangers posed by hunger, thirst, disease, desire, poverty, fear, and the pain associated with being killed. 6. However, for those beings who are unable to do so due to fate or negligence, the beings who have the necessary freedom to do so should do so out of compassion. 7. When other sufferings are relieved, the compassion shown is the repetition of the lower grade of compassion, which will lead to only a small amount of worldly pleasure. 8. However, the compassion shown while alleviating the suffering caused by hunger and the suffering caused when being killed is called the superior grade of compassion. Therefore, worldly pleasure will be made possible. Explain the types of compassion in terms of hunger and disease. God has commanded in the Vedic scriptures that people who have deceived other creatures by failing to reduce the risks they face despite having the freedom and intellect to do so would not be granted the freedom to enjoy this world's pleasures and the happiness of emancipation. They will also no longer have the freedom to partake in the worldly luxuries they currently enjoy. 3. Those who have the intellect and freedom to help those who lack those qualities and must face the threat of starvation and the threat of death due to carelessness or destiny should do so out of compassion and without deceiving them. For it should be clear that this is the primary goal of exhibiting compassion for other beings. There are therefore 2 types of compassion on the road of offering compassion to beings: the inferior form of compassion and the superior kind of compassion. Of these, preventing starvation and protecting people from being killed is considered the highest form of compassion, so it is given weight or special recognition. Additionally, individuals who are kind enough to alleviate hunger in those in need will not hold back on providing them with water to slake their thirst. There is no work involved in giving water. Lakes, ponds, canals, etc. all contain water. Hunger will result in irreversible damage to the body. However, thirst will just pose a little threat that may be readily remedied without doing much harm to the body. Those who have the compassion to end hunger-related pain undoubtedly have the compassion to end disease-related misery as well. Diseases rise as starvation worsens. The best way to cure ailments is with a healthy diet. Even though various medications are used to treat ailments, a healthy diet is crucial for the body's nourishment. A body may survive for a long time with an illness, but it cannot survive for even one day without food. Those who are compassionate enough to feed the hungry will undoubtedly be compassionate enough to end suffering brought on by desire. People would want food only if they were truly hungry. The body may be sustained by a desire for many days, but it cannot be sustained by a hunger for even a single day. Those who have filled their hunger by eating when it is available can satisfy their want with minimal effort, or they can soothe themselves. Those with enough compassion to provide food to the hungry would undoubtedly have enough compassion to alleviate their own poverty and that of those who lack the freedom to do so. There is no form of poverty worse than hunger-related pain. After a few days, poverty can be overcome. Hunger, however, cannot be. The body can survive in poverty, but not in hunger. Those who are sympathetic enough to ease hunger will undoubtedly be sympathetic enough to ease terror. Therefore, the main objective of having compassion for other creatures is to lessen their suffering from hunger and their pain from being put to death. Even though removing suffering brought on by hunger and suffering from being slain is the basic objective of compassion, doing so is frequently emphasized here for the following reasons. When one learns that a being is about to be killed, one acts compassionately to stop the being from starving, and if the being suffers while being killed in another way, one will undoubtedly act compassionately to stop them from being afraid. People who do not alleviate suffering when someone is slain will not have the compassion to alleviate even hunger-related misery. The suffering experienced when being killed is taken into account and frequently stressed as being included in the suffering due to hunger. While killing due to hunger cannot be relieved by anything other than food, killing occurring due to enmity, etc., can be prevented by any means. Explain the additional types of compassion in terms of hunger and other sufferings. Additionally, when overcome by the feelings of hunger, people forget all other sufferings including thirst, illness, desire, poverty, and fear and go in search of food. Even a murderer who has been given a death sentence by the king forgets his dread and trouble when he feels hungry and attempts to satisfy his hunger. When hungry, sick, and elderly people have been told by the doctor that they will die trying to satisfy their hunger rather than think about their problems. One who has chosen to provide food for hunger out of compassion will never agree to have the beings compelled to suffer and be killed in any other way. This should be recognized. Stress is frequently provided to lessen the suffering caused by the pains of hunger. If it is true that hunger causes harm to all beings, including humans, animals, and birds, it is important to understand and alleviate their hunger. However, if one attempts to do so, it will be impossible to satisfy the hunger of all 7 categories of beings that God created, including divine or celestial beings, humans, animals, birds, reptiles, and plants. The dwellers of hell are in some other places beyond our reach where we cannot appease their hunger, and their hunger is appeased by the punishing authorities, and so we need to sympathize with the divine beings, thinking that they too would suffer when they were hungry. The celestial beings have more freedom than the humans, who have enough ability to alleviate their hunger by their own efforts, so others need not worry about their hunger. To quell their hunger, man must water the plant species that they have worked to develop so that they will be beneficial for their survival amid the plants like trees and grass that do not have even a little independence. It is unnecessary to consider the other plant species since they are living because they are fed by the omnibenevolent rule. It is not our freedom to feed them despite our awareness of their hunger. It is God's freedom. Explain compassion in terms of hunger and animal suffering. The animals that crawl on land and in water, including reptiles, birds, and animals, have food provided for them by the omnibenevolent law in accordance with their destinies. Knowing the right kind of food to provide for each species belongs to God, not to us. However, among those species, the cows, ox, buffalo, goats, and horses that are reared should be given special consideration because they too would suffer from lack of food. The losses and sufferings caused by hunger are understood by intuition, or the soul's intelligence, through the capacity of the inner instrument, such as the mind, and through the sense organs, such as the eye, etc. The losses and suffering caused by hunger are understood by intuition, or the soul's intelligence, through the capacity of the inner instrument, such as the mind, and through the sense organs, such as the eye, etc. This understanding is like both. The food provided by the omnipotent gracious law according to their destiny alone is not sufficient for the souls. The freedom of the soul to earn through effort is given to humans on a large scale by the grace of God. It is ordained by the omnipotent, ever-flowing, gracious law that human beings should not get food because of destiny and should suffer from hunger. To alleviate that hunger, mutual help should be expected from one another. The other person should give food out of sympathy and generosity. What is the purpose of obtaining this human body? The human body cannot be obtained as easily as the bodies of other beings. In the human body, the manifestation of the soul and the manifestation of grace are expressed to a great extent. It is uncertain whether another human body can be obtained if this one go away. This human body has been obtained only to achieve eternal bliss. Therefore, only humans are required to steadfastly adhere to the law of providing compassion to living things by satisfying their needs. This is because God has ordained it. Explain the omnipotent, gracious law in the superhuman beings. How is it that, while the food provided by the omnipotent, gracious law alone according to their destiny is sufficient for beings like animals, birds, etc., to humans alone, food obtained by their own efforts is also necessary in addition to the food provided by the omnipotent, gracious law according to their destiny? Why? This is because God ordained that humans would overcome the effects of their previous karmas by consuming the food made available by the omnipotent, gracious law in accordance with their destiny, strengthening their bodies with internal organs, and adopting the virtuous path of practice. As a result, it is important to understand that the food provided in accordance with their destiny will enable them to experience the joy of superhuman abilities and salvation. The bodies of beings like animals, birds, reptiles, and plants are the bodies ordained as punishment. As a result, food will be provided to them in accordance with their destiny without interruption by the omnipotent, gracious power, eliminating the need for them to work for their food. However, it was first made clear that having compassion for other beings is a trait shared by all beings because, by following the path of compassion toward all living things, especially all humans, their suffering from hunger in general should be relieved and the joy of satisfaction should be fostered in them. If a being is about to be killed by a method like that of hunger, it should be avoided as much as possible, and given life, it should be made happy. If the beings happen to suffer due to some other reasons like disease, fear, etc., the path of compassion toward them should be continued. Because all these expressions of compassion are directed solely at beings, it has been ordained by God that one should have compassion for all life. This includes wild and ferocious beings, who should never suffer because we kill them, but who may suffer slightly out of fear. If some of the creatures that humans have paid to help them live and help them support themselves eat tamasic or food of an evil nature, can their hunger be satisfied by giving them such food? The justification is that killing a being to satisfy another being's hunger with meat is completely against God's will and goes against His teachings on compassion for living things. All living things are a part of natural truth and serve as the setting for the manifestation of grace, which is God's natural manifestation. Killing a being to satisfy another being's hunger is wholly against the principle of showing compassion to all living beings because when God's natural manifestation is obscured, life's nature will not be present. God's natural manifestation and life's natural manifestation do not conflict with one another because they both reveal themselves in every single person. Can we assume that the ecstasy experienced by animals like tigers and lions after killing and devouring another being and satisfying their hunger with tamasic food, food of an evil or dark nature, represents a piece of God's natural manifestation and life's natural manifestation in its entirety? No. Tamasic or dark-natured of God's natural manifestation, which is perfect reality, and the soul's natural manifestation is a fraction of the perfect reality, just as darkness cannot show light. This type of food is known as tamasic food since it is gotten through torture evils, which prohibit God's manifestation from manifesting itself. When this food is ingested, this manifestation of joy, which is blissful contentment, occurs. It is important to realize that this is the outward manifestation of the endless illusion created by the pasuk, or the stupid souls constrained by their own inner instruments. What is pasu, the stupid soul known as? It is important to understand that the term pasu, or the ignorant soul, or pseudo-soul, refers to the soul that has lost its wisdom as a result of the triple connection of impurities, namely egoism, illusion, and the consequences of its past deeds. The pasu, or ignorant soul, manifests in this way. In a similar way, even though the impure illusory inner instruments and the tamasic, or ignorant, nature are dark nature, they too get enlightened by the superior beings, God's effulgence, which is the veil. The brightness of the sun's light appears in the darkness of the clouds which veil the sun, so even that darkness gets manifested rather than darkness is enlightened. This should lead us to conclude that the manifestation brought on by tamasic food only manifests the impure illusion-veiled inner instruments. But if plants like trees, grass, rice, and other vegetation are thought of as having life, are they not tamasic foods if we cause them pain and eat them, and the delight they produce is the joy of the impure mind and inner instruments? The answer is yes. Living things also include plants like trees, grass, paddy, etc. It is indeed somewhat tamasic food if the pain is inflicted upon them and they are eaten as food. Consuming that food also results in enjoyment, but it is the happiness of the unclean inner instruments only. But this is untrue. The seeds where their lives appear are inert, just like the other seeds, and we can sow the seeds ourselves and give them life without taking away their lives. Beings like tree, grass, paddy, etc., have only one sense knowledge, that of being touched only. We do not consume the principal, main plant, with life. When we remove vegetables, fruit, etc., they are dead when we take them. We only consume the seeds, vegetables, fruits, flowers, tubers, and leaves that are inert and that have appeared on the living vegetations. There won't be any pain, just as cutting one's nails and hair and the release of semen don't. In addition, vegetations don't have any internal mechanisms like minds or bodies that are always at work, so it can't be argued that killing life also doesn't cause pain. Therefore, it is not against the principle of treating living things with compassion. It should also be realized that the happiness that results from eating such food just represents God's manifestation alongside the manifestation of life. If seeds had life, they would grow even before they were placed in the ground, Nevertheless, certain seeds do not grow even after being sown in the ground. These seeds are believed to be an inert matter that permits life to enter them at a later stage. Furthermore, the seed is the reason. Even young infants are aware that this cause solely affects the physical appearance of the body. While life is immortal, the body is not. Only the mortal body requires a cause. Eternal existence is unaffected by it. Therefore, it should be clear that seeds are nothing more than inert substances. How does the soul enter the body if that is the case? It works like this. According to omnipotent gracious law, if seeds are sown in soil and water, souls will pass through the water in atom-sized bodies, enter the soil, mix with the processing energy of the soil, and then enter the seeds. This needs to be realized. If sprouts shouldn't be removed at all, how can it be argued that seeds, vegetables, leaves, etc., are edible? The soul by which water enters the soil after the seed sinks into it combines with the earth's processing energy and enters the seed sprouts. As a result, sprouts are not inert substances like seeds, vegetables, etc. So, it is accurate to say that sprouts shouldn't be removed. If the question is raised, even though eating seeds, vegetables, fruits, etc. doesn't involve the death of any living things, are these foods not impure like nails, hair, semen, etc.? The correct response is that there is no impurity in them because neither life energy nor the development of senses exist in them. Consuming seeds, vegetables, fruits, tree leaves, grass, paddy, etc. is therefore not in conflict with having compassion for other beings. What is the role of non-vegetarian food for animals and humans? If one is interested in learning whether non-vegetarian food, such as meat, is the approved diet for wild creatures like tigers, etc., it is not the prescribed food for those people, they have just adopted it as a hereditary habit. Therefore, it is possible to steer clear of that food and force them to eat vegetarian fare that is sattvic, or pure. A good man keeps the cat and dog they raised from wandering off and consuming impure fare and teaches them from an early age to form the habit of doing so. They too survive solely on that food. Since no one has ever taught wild creatures like tigers, lions, and others to eat only pure food, they only do so out of habit. Explain the term bliss and their types. The bliss obtained while adhering to this practice of showing compassion to living beings is of two kinds, namely the inferior kind of bliss pertaining to this world and the superior kind of bliss or the divine bliss. The lower grade of compassion refers to the joy that arises from alleviating the sufferings of desire and so on. It should be noted that these are some of the pleasures of this world. They are, when compassion is shown to beings who a. suffer from a lack of clothing, b. a lack of a place to live, c. a lack of lands to till, d. a lack of woman, a wife for coition, and e. a lack of money or other similar aid to do. When clothes are given to wear, a place to live is given, land is given, a woman is given for coition, and money, or similar aids are given to fulfill their desires, the bliss that manifests on the faces of those who have received manifests on the faces of those who have given. Bliss appears partially in God's suitable instruments and fully in the being's suitable instruments, as seen above. If a person discovers that the clothes he wears are of inferior quality while the clothes worn by another person are of superior quality, he feels sad and suffers. Should we not show compassion to him? The answer is that the bliss that results from alleviating hunger-related suffering is known as divine bliss or superior bliss. This includes the enjoyment of all worldly pleasures, as well as the enjoyment of the powers of yoga and knowledge in this birth, as well as the bliss of enjoyment of liberation at the end. When beings fatigued by hunger are offered food, they eat it out of compassion for those beings and their hunger is satisfied. Bliss will overflow from their inner being and face at that moment. Those who have given food will also have bliss manifested on their inner being and face as a result of seeing that bliss, because both blisses appear fully in God's instrument, including the soul. They are divine bliss. This should be understood. Explain the importance of pangs of hunger in different human types. Those who do not have clothes, a place, land, a woman, money, and so on, and thus suffer, can bear their sufferings with their willpower, can sustain their lives, and put forth as much effort as they can. When suffering is caused by hunger, one should not tolerate, rather, bear, that suffering with willpower. If one tries to bear it, he will perish. When people are hungry, they will sell their children, the children will sell their parents, the husband will sell the wife, and the wife will sell the husband to alleviate their hunger-related suffering. If that is the case, it goes without saying that they would sell their house, cattle, land, possessions, and other non-essentials to satisfy their hunger. Even an emperor who rules over the entire world, when struck by hunger, will set aside his powerful position, and complain to nearby ministers, "I am hungry, what shall I do?" Even great warriors who can hold the arrows which have pierced their chests, shot by the enemy, with one hand and conquering all the enemies who charge them, in a minute, when they feel hungry will complain to those standing nearby, "I will be tired. I can't fight." Even sages who know the true knowledge and are enjoying it by experience, hating and renouncing all the pleasures of this world and the celestial world as well, Indraloka, and treating them as fresh, and even yogis who have annulled their mind by controlling their organs of perception and are always in deep meditation, true nishtai, and even siddhas with unlimited supernatural powers capable of even reviving the dead when hunger faces them, leaving off their experience-oriented goals, move to the next town in search of food. When faced with hunger, men of austerities, munis, and men who are always doing penance, tapasvi, abandon their experience-oriented goal and travel to the next town in search of food. When they don't find it, they are all disturbed to the core. When some dishonorable thing happens to them even in their dreams, when hunger confronts them, sensitive honorable people will lose their self-respect by expressing their distress to unworthy people. Even religious heads, acharyas, who observe strict discipline of their respective caste and religion expect food when hunger strikes, forgetting their strict discipline. Even great master of education who have acquired vast knowledge through learning and listening, who know all the intricate things that are difficult to understand, who can do very great deeds that are difficult to do, when faced with hunger, lose their intelligence and cognition and become confused. When hunger confronts lustful individuals who indulge in the pleasure of sexual union, forgetting coition, and becoming disgusted with lust, they become perturbed. Even egoists who are very proud, believing that they are very great and that no one is greater than them, lose their ego when faced with hunger and praise those who offer them food as very great people. Even vain people who lavishly entertain on special occasions lose their vanity and are perplexed when faced with hunger. When all these people become like this when faced with hunger, imagine how much poor people who have no support will suffer when faced with hunger. How happy those poor people will be if they are given food at that time. How much benefit will those who brought that happiness receive? Words cannot adequately describe it. When hunger increases, the enlightenment of the being's knowledge becomes perplexed. God's manifestation, which is the knowledge of knowledge, becomes veiled. When it becomes veiled, the principle of the soul becomes tired. When it becomes tired, the primordial nature dims. When it dims, qualities change, mind becomes confused and shattered, the intellect becomes spoiled, the deciding power, chitta, becomes confused, the ego is destroyed, and the life force whirls. Sultriness affects the elements, the air and phlegm in the body are both disturbed in their states. Eyes become dim and sink into sockets. Ears become deaf with a humming sound. Tongue becomes dry and parched. Nose becomes soft and scorched. Skin thins and loses sensitivity. Arms and legs become tired and hang loose. Speech changes tone and falters. Teeth become loosened. The anus and urethra are burned by heat. The body is scorched. The hair becomes stiff and disorganized. The nerves lose stiffness and wear out. The blood vessels lose tension and become soft. The bones are scorched, and the joints are loosened. The heart burns as if it is being cooked. The brain shrinks. The semen becomes hot and dried. The liver shrinks in size. The blood and fluids lose their water content. The flesh becomes flabby and loses its elasticity. The stomach burns, afflictions, and troubles worsen. And the symptoms and experiences that occur when one is about to die continue. Hunger causes all these problems for all living things. All their sufferings are alleviated when they obtain and consume food. The structural principles then flourish well, the mind cools, the intellect shines, and the luster of the inner being and that of God fully manifest both on the soul and on the face, and a unique joy of satisfaction is created. Which virtue is equivalent to this virtue that produces this kind of bliss? Which God can we compare these virtuous people who perform this virtuous act to? It is true that their nature is that of the Supreme God alone, who is above all the gods. This teaches us that pangs of hunger are the sum of all sufferings, pangs of birth and pangs of death, and that the bliss of satisfaction obtained through food is the bliss of liberation alone, which pervades all places inside, outside, middle, below, above, and all sides and has no change at any time. If there is no hunger, living beings will not expect one another to help them with food. If there is no expectation, the act of helping will not occur. If it does not occur, compassion in beings will not manifest, and God's grace will not be obtained. As a result, hunger is also a tool provided by God. If the happiness of those suffering from hunger is not obtained even when they see their mother, father, wife, child, field, land, gold, and jewels, What is the nature of the happiness that manifests when food is obtained? As a result, the natural form, visible form, and attributes of this food are inextricably linked to the natural form, visible form, and attributes of God's grace. When the fire of hunger is burning within the bodies of the poor, extinguishing it through food alone is known as showing compassion to living beings. When the poisonous wind of hunger is about to blow out the lamp of knowledge of the poor, providing them with food and preventing the lamp from being put out and lighting it alone is known as showing compassion to living beings. When the whole family of the structural and psychic principles of the beings who dwell in the bodies to attain divine bliss become confused in their states and are about to be destroyed by hunger, providing food at that time and making them flourish is known as showing compassion to the living beings. When the poison known as hunger rises to the head and the living beings are about to swoon, bringing down the poison with food and reviving them from the swoon is known as showing compassion to living beings. When the cruel scorpion known as hunger enters the stomach and stings, the stinging pain rises, and the poor beings are at a loss for what to do. Removing the stinging pain with food and clearing their confusion alone is known as showing compassion to, only relieving the anxiety of poor people who are worried thinking, "Oh, the sinner known as hunger, which had half killed us and eaten us all night yesterday, will return today. What can we do about it?" This is known as showing compassion to living beings, only removing the perplexity of the poor beings, who are perplexed like the fly that has fallen into honey, saying, "The sun is rising, and the ailment known as hunger is upon us. What can we do about this fateful event?" is known as showing compassion to beings. When poor beings in distress worry like this, "It's getting dark. Where will we go for food now? Whom shall we approach? What are we going to do?" To dispel that sorrow alone is to show compassion to living beings, to wipe away the tears of poor people who are crying, saying, "Legs have become tired by walking and walking, mouth has become tired by asking and asking, mind has become tired by thinking and thinking. Now what shall we do for this wretched stomach?" Giving food to them is referred to as showing compassion to living beings. To save the self-respect alone of self-respecting persons with tired minds and faces, who resemble the dumb person who had a foreboding dream and are tongue-tied unable to express their suffering openly but lament in silence, the day too has gone. Hunger tortures, shyness prevents from going to other places, self-respect pains to ask openly, stomach burns, no means is known. Giving them food is referred to as showing compassion to living beings. To feed the poor beings in order to alleviate their grief and assist them in falling asleep when they are sleepless and arguing within themselves. Had we in our previous birth sensed the hunger of hungry people and alleviated their hunger, someone would have come forward in this birth to appease our hunger, sensing that time we didn't do so. Thus, there is no one to do so now, is alone called as showing compassion to living beings. To appease the hunger of the wise men with discriminating power who, even when they become so hungry, are emaciated with all the nerves visible all over the body, and their life energy has shrunk, and they do not have the courage to ask other people for food, but instead think only of God and lie down to sleep with the cruel fire of hunger deep down their stomach, resembling the people who begging sleep lying on a fire, is alone called showing compassion to the living beings. How to starve even today like yesterday. What can we do for the poor wife's stomach if we dare to go without food because of our adolescence? We don't mind this lady's hunger, but our elderly parents, who are already frail due to their age, will die if they go without food even today. What can we do about it? How can we look at the tired faces of our children who have grown tired of crying and crying for food? Thinking with sorrow like this again and again, with eyes filled with tears, hands on their cheeks, and the fire of hunger, fire of fear, and fire of anxiety always aglow inside, like the fire in the blacksmith's furnace is always kept aglow by blowing. Some poor people suffer giving food to them, and removing their sorrow alone is called showing compassion to beings. Giving food to the suffering handicapped poor who are filled with sorrow and keep thinking, people are lying helpless and hungry here, despite the fact that they have organs like the eye, hand, and leg that are perfect and have enough strength to earn their food. How are we going to get food if we are blind, deaf, dumb, and have limb defects? How will we satisfy our hunger? Is referred to as showing compassion to beings. To alleviate the hunger of all people suffering from hunger, without inquiring and differentiating regarding their country's way of life, religious way of life, castes, way of living, the deed done for living irrespective of the country to which they belong, irrespective of the religion to which they belong, irrespective of the caste to which they belong, irrespective of the deed they do, knowing that God's manifestation prevailing in all living beings is communicable when they are hungry, and their hunger can be satisfied by sattvic food. Agreeing with the virtuous way of life is referred to as showing compassion to living beings. Some people, despite having the knowledge to acquire the necessary worldly pleasures and freedom to appease hunger, do not acquire that freedom due to their previous sinful deeds and negligence, and suffer from hunger. By giving food to them to relieve their suffering from hunger, one creates the bliss of satisfaction because of compassion to living beings only. By this compassion, which is the cause of creating the bliss of satisfaction, the door of the eternal abode is opened. As a result, the householders who have earned the key to the house of salvation called compassion will, without the aid of any other means such as mind control, purifying actions, yoga, or divine knowledge, reach the house of bliss which they could not have reached at any other time, open the door of the house, enter it, and live there as the eternal liberated ones. People who practice austerities such as pilgrimage to holy places, bathing in holy rivers, living in holy places, paying homage to holy idols, reciting prayers, chanting mantras, practicing austerities, performing sacrifices in fire, worshipping idols, and so on, devotees, rishis, seers, yogis who have given up food and sleep, renounced worldly affairs, controlled their organs, and annulled their minds, the siddhas, unless they have earned the key called compassion to the living beings, and have the experience of Brahman the Absolute, they will climb up to the back or front of the superior abode, wait nearby, and return to earn that key. They are unable to open and enter that house and dwell there in bliss. This should be truly understood. Therefore, it should also be understood that for people with enlightened knowledge, showing compassion to living beings alone is God's worship. Furthermore, householders who enjoy worldly pleasures such as eating and mating, as well as living a compassionate life toward all beings, will be fully entitled to the Almighty God's grace. People who continue to improve their wisdom, do yoga, penance, practice austerities, chant holy mantras, or words, and meditate without living a compassionate life towards all living beings will not be entitled to God's grace even in a small measure. they should not even be considered to have soul effulgence. All actions performed without compassion for beings are meaningless juggling. As all living beings are part and parcel of God's natural truth, and the manifestation of God's grace expresses itself in each one of them, if householders whose resources are limited, only enough to appease the hunger of their family members, like their mother, father, children, life partner, etc., either go out to appease the hunger of strangers, leaving the family in lunch to suffer from hunger, or begin to feed their family, leaving out the strangers who approach them for food to suffer from hunger. These actions will not be sanctioned by God's grace. As a result, they should reduce their family expenditures as much as possible and appease the hunger of both sets of people. The householders with meager means who can only pacify the hunger of their family members with great difficulty should at least pacify the hunger of their family and should have sympathy for the hungry strangers who approach them and take necessary steps to appease their hunger through someone else. The able and famous householders, according to their income, appease the hunger of their mother, father, their life partner, children, assistants, relatives, friends, guests, elderly people, slaves or servants, neighbors, enemies, etc. Furthermore, they should appease the hunger of domestic animals such as cows, oxen, buffalo, goats, horses, and so on, which they have earned to be of use to their family, as well as the plants they have grown for the family, and create the bliss of satisfaction in all of them, without spending money lavishly on various functions such as marriage, childbirth, birth of a child, worship of deities, and so on. They should feed the hungry beings and appease their hunger even during functions like marriage, and thus do the great deed of creating the bliss of satisfaction. It should be known as a sworn truth that they will receive many times greater happiness than those whose hunger was appeased. During special functions such as marriage, the householders decorate the pandal or shamayana, perform many different types of ceremonies there, arrange for some novel entertainments such as dance, music, procession, and so on, and provide for some extravagant dainties such as appam/cakes, the sweet pancake, and varieties of mixed rice, and are so engrossed in the gala pleasures that they do not even care to look at the faces of the hungry poor. During that joyous occasion, something terrible happens to them, their children, or their spouse. Then they lose all of their joy and become immersed in sorrow. When they mourn in this manner, neither the decorated pandal, nor the rituals performed with or without intention, nor the novel entertainments such as dance, music, orchestra, procession, etc., nor the luxurious dishes such as appam, various varieties of mixed rice, etc., can ever prevent the calamity. Had they given food to the truly hungry beings and appeased their hunger, thus bringing out the divine manifestation and divine bliss on their inner selves and faces during that auspicious function, that manifestation and bliss would have immediately removed that danger and created the manifestation and bliss. Isn't that right? As a result, even on special occasions such as weddings, one should, to the best of one's ability, appease the hunger of the hungry and create the bliss of satisfaction. This is extremely important. If householders suffering from incurable diseases such as gastric ulcer, chronic stomach pain, and so on, practice being compassionate to beings alone as an austerity, according to their capacity, that practice of being compassionate to beings alone will serve as a good medicine and cure their diseases. bestowing robust health on them. This is correct. If householders who have not had descendants for a long time and thus observe many sorrowful vows, appease the hunger of the hungry poor according to their limit, practicing it as a vow, it is true that practice of showing compassion to beings alone will bestow on them good intelligent descendants. If householders who have realized through some means that their lifespan is very short and are filled with sorrow, appease the hunger of the hungry poor, adopting it as a vow, it is true that practice of showing compassion to beings alone will give them long life. If householders who are saddened by their lack of education, knowledge, wealth, and pleasure follow the policy of feeding the hungry poor to the best of their ability, taking it as their sole vow, that practice of compassion alone will provide them with education, knowledge, wealth, and pleasure. To the householders who, filled with compassion for all living beings, appease the hunger of the hungry poor, observing that as their only vow, the heat of the sun in summer will not bother them by scorching, the hot soil will not turn them, the natural calamities like torrential rain, fierce wind, heavy snow, roaring thunder, great fire, etc., including epidemic diseases like smallpox, poisonous gas, virus fever, floods in the river, dacoits, and enemies, etc., will not at all harm them. They will never be dishonored by kings or gods. The yields of the compassionate householders' fields will continue to increase without any effort. Profit in their business will come without any hindrance. They will get name, fame, and promotion in their jobs without any difficulty. They will always be surrounded by relatives and servants. Wild animals, poisonous creatures, evil ghosts, and wicked deities will not cause them fear, and it is a sworn promise that no harm will come to them as a result of carelessness or fate. It should be understood that it is God's will that this supreme vow of appeasing the hunger of the hungry people and thus creating the bliss of satisfaction in them, known as showing compassion on living beings, be taken by all, the devas or celestial beings, the celibates, the householders, ascetics, monks, males, females, old, young, and people of high and low rank. Concerning appeasing the hunger of the hungry, even if the wife prevents the husband prevents the wife, the father prevents the children prevent the father, the preceptor prevents the disciple, God prevents his devotee, and the king prevents his subjects. One should not be disturbed at all by the hindrances, and believing truthfully that the effects of good or bad deeds done by anyone will return to the doer only and not to any other person, one should carry on with their mission of having compassion on living beings. As the minds of the virtuous people become pure when they only think of feeding the truly hungry beings, it should be known truthfully that those virtuous people are none other than yogis. While feeding them as they desired, with full heart and courtesy, they enjoy when those people eat as if they themselves are partaking of the food. Those virtuous people can be called gnanis or true wise men. God's manifestation fills up the soul inside and outside, below and above, in the middle and on the sides, cooling all the principles like subtle instruments and nourishing and flourishing the whole body with chillness, and blossoms on the face which blossoms with the bliss of satisfaction, which is nothing but the divine satisfaction itself. The virtuous ones who have fed them see God and the divine bliss directly, so they have seen God themselves and are the liberated ones enjoying the divine bliss. It is sworn in the presence of God that the great men who adopt the policy of being compassionate to living beings and relieving beings from the danger known as hunger, regardless of caste or religion, and whatever deed they may be performing, are great enough to be worshipped by the devas or celestials, saints, siddhas, and yogis. To learn more about living in the path of showing compassion to living beings, read the Veda or scriptures of equanimity. Original Jeevkarunyazakam is in Tamil, written by Chithamabaram Ramlinga Swami, born 1823 and disappeared in January 30th by transforming his body into a pure light body in 1874. According his message, he is present in visible every soul, guiding the compassion to feed the hunger of the world. This modified English translation was from www.trurtpa.org. One fine morning at 6 a.m., the day being Thursday, the 11th of Vaikasi in the Tamil year Prabhava, the inauguration ceremony took place in the presence of the saint. This corresponds to the year 1867 in English. The saint himself took pains of lighting the oven and render it as a festive occasion. Thousands of people were fed continuously without a lull for 3 days. According to the instructions of the saint, the oven that was lit up then was kept burning without any interruption. So far none had felt the shortage of food grains in this institution, as the public were donating spontaneously till today. Sri Chithamabaram Ramlinga Swami started the fire to cook food for the hungry. Till this day the fires continue and never put it off for century-old Dharmasala, Parthipuram, Tamil Nadu, India. Please practice the compassion through feeding the hungry to receive liberation, salvation, and get enlightenment at this birth itself. Our Valalar Swami will always be with you.